In 1548 in Nola, a town near Naples, a baby boy was born. His parents, Ferlissa Savellino and Giovanni Bruno, would name him Filippo Bruno. The baby boy would grow up being influenced by Thomas Aquinas, Averroes, John Duns Scotus, Marsilio Ficino, Plato, Copernicus, Nicholas of Cusca, Raymond Lully, Neoplatonism, Renaissance Hermeticism, and even legends of the Egyptian god Thoth. Their son would be labeled in history as a priest, philosopher, writer, mathematician, occultist, martyr, and heretic. Around the age of 11, Bruno was sent away to Naples for his education. He attended public lectures at the Studium Generale and received private lessons at the Augustinian monastery. By the time he turned 15, Bruno became part of the Dominican order at San Domenico Maggiore Monastery. Bruno then decided to change his name to Giordano, after Giordano Crispo, his metaphysics teacher. When Bruno turned 24 in 1572, he was ordained as a priest and was becoming well known for his memory. His memory became so renowned that he even traveled to Rome to show Pope Pius V his mnemonic system. Bruno's propensity for free thinking, outspoken criticism of theological doctrines, and penchant for both reading and suggesting forbidden books gained him a reputation within the church. The early reports of Bruno owning a copy of Hermas's writings and defending Arianism, not to be confused with Arianism. It is the belief that Christ was created by God and not one and the same, but he was still also God. This caused the Inquisition to begin writing up indictments against Bruno. When Bruno learned of this, he fled Naples. While living in Rome in 1576, Bruno continued his vocal critique of the faith, and found himself in the same predicament as before. Once again, he fled. This would be a common theme in Bruno's life, as he was very argumentative about beliefs, which were very controversial for the time, and pissed off a lot of people. His passion for his beliefs would estrange people that would have been his allies. For example, Galileo and Johannes Kepler did not think very much of Bruno. Despite his beliefs and the church's growing suspicions, he remained a priest for 11 years, and through his life was able to keep teaching positions and audiences with influential and powerful people. In 1579, Bruno had fled to Geneva. It is debated that at this time he became a Calvinist. However, Bruno himself vehemently denied this, and he was excommunicated by the Calvinist Council on the grounds of disrespecting the heads of the church, as well as his loyalty towards Copernicism. The excommunication forced him to leave the city. From Geneva, he went to Toulouse, Lyon, where he was a teacher, and began to become more well known for his fantastic memory. Bruno's impressive memory was based on, in part, off of a complicated system of mnemonics, but his peers found it easier to understand these feats by attributing it to magical powers. When he was in Lyon, he finished his writing on the art of remembering called Clavis Magna, or Great Key in English. Bruno moved to Paris in 1581 and lived in France for 7 years. There he would publish 20 books, most being on memory training. These writings would reveal the influence that Raymond Lully and the Neoplatonists had on him. He would hold lectures that would attract powerful people, one being Henry III. His Henry III connection would lead him to live with the French ambassador in London from 1583 to 1585. During this time, he published 2 books, The Ash Wednesday Supper and On the Infinite Universe and Worlds. In these 2 books, Bruno begins to argue his cosmological beliefs. Bruno had a steadfast belief in the Copernican heliocentric theory. In his writing, he uses what is now known as Galileo's ship to argue the theory. Bruno also believed that the universe was infinite, with many other Earths that contained intelligent beings with their own souls. His infinite universe was filled with pure air aether that did not resist the heavenly bodies. He argued that the heavenly bodies existed in their own momentum, and discarded the concept of a hierarchical universe. He stated, "The universe is then one infinite immobile. It is not capable of comprehension, and therefore is endless and limitless, and to that extent infinite and indeterminable, and consequently immobile." Bruno wrote that the stars are suns that produce their own light and heat, as well as having their own planets orbiting around them. According to Stephen Soter, astrophysicist, Bruno was the first to propose this idea. Bruno went further with his claims of other suns and planets, and said that the other worlds, quote, have no less virtue nor a nature different than that of our earth, and, like earth, contain animals and inhabitants. He believed that those other inhabitants were also in possession of souls. His cosmological beliefs tied into his theological beliefs. While he believed that all animals and objects possessed souls, he also believed that the earth itself was the soul of God. Many academics claim that Bruno believed in pantheism, but Max Bernhard Weinstein, physicist and philosopher, claims that Bruno's beliefs were more akin to pandeism. During his time in France, Bruno also attempted to get a teaching job at Oxford. However, he was denied the position, probably because in his book, The Ash Wednesday Supper, he says that Oxford professors knew more about beer than about Greek. Not a great way to make an impression on a possible employer. In 1585, Bruno returned to Paris, where he made many attempts to reconcile with the Catholic Church. The Church agreed to reconciliation as long as Bruno returned to his order, but Bruno refused. A year later, in 1586, he found himself in yet another unfavorable position. He had written 120 theses against Aristotelian natural science, as well as a pamphlet against Fabrizio Mordente, a Catholic mathematician. This soured France's fondness for Bruno, and after he engaged in a violent debate about the proper use of a scientific instrument, he left France and went to Germany. Bruno again sought out a teaching position, but this time he was accepted to teach at Wittenberg. For 2 years he lectured on Aristotle, but in 1588, when the intellectual climate changed, he was forced to move. He briefly went to Helmstedt and taught as a professor until the Lutherans excommunicated him, and again Bruno was forced to move. From 1589 to 1590, Bruno dictated works to his friend, and after that, in 1591, he found himself in Frankfurt. The beginning of Bruno's ultimate undoing came in the form of an invitation from a noble named Giovanni Mocenigo. He had invited Bruno to Venice in 1591 to teach him the secret of memory. Bruno tried for months to teach Mocenigo, but Mocenigo never learned, and Bruno informed Mocenigo that he was going to leave Venice. After failing to learn Bruno's natural magic, Mocenigo turned him into the Venetian inquisitors. Bruno was arrested by them on May 22, 1592. He defended himself against the accusations of blasphemy and heresy, but the Roman Inquisition had asked the Venetian Inquisition to transfer Bruno to Rome. The Venetian Inquisition eventually agreed, and Bruno was sent to Rome in February of 1593. For 6 years, the Roman Inquisition kept him imprisoned. It is not clear as to why they waited so long to begin the trial, but in the spring of 1599 his trial began. The Roman Inquisition had 130 accounts against Bruno, and had tried several times to have Bruno retract his errors, but he refused. Bruno tried to obtain an audience with Pope Clement VIII during this time, in order to make peace with the Church, hoping that he would be able to a partial recantation. However, he was never able to meet with the Pope. Bruno's trial was overseen by the Inquisitor Cardinal Robert Bellarmine. Bruno's counts against him were based on theological errors. Although some key documents have been lost, there are still some that exist that summarize the trial. Some of the charges against him were a claim that Christ was not God, but a skillful magician, speculation on the virginity of Mary, belief in transmigration of the human soul into brutes, participating in divination and magic, opinions conflicting the Trinity divinity of Jesus and incarnation, belief in the plurality of worlds, opinions inconsistent with the Church about transubstantiation and Mass, speaking against the opinions of the Catholic faith, assertion that the Holy Ghost is the soul of the world, and the position that animals, objects, and the earth have souls. On January 20th, 1600, Bruno was declared a heretic by Pope Clement VIII. He was sentenced to death. Gaspar Schopp of Breslau wrote that Bruno made a threatening gesture towards the judges and said, quote, "Perhaps you pronounce this sentence against me with greater fear than I receive it." End quote. Bruno was executed on February 17, 1600, Ash Wednesday. He was hung naked, upside down, and gagged on a stake and burned alive in Campo de' Fiori, a market square. His ashes were later thrown into the Tiber River. In 1603, all of Bruno's works were put into the Index Librorum Prohibitorum. Then, in 1889, Italian Masonic circles erected a statue of Bruno in Campo dei Fiori. It still stands to this day. Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like. If you want more content like this, check out my other videos and subscribe to my channel. I release a video every week. If you already are subscribed, thank you for your support. If you want to follow me on social media, the links are in the description below. Sleep tight, friends.